Our community, our community is facing a crisis in housing affordability that many leaders and organizations are working hard to address. In October 2021, the Co-Housing Association of the U.S. held an online conference on the topic of affordable housing. Our three speakers attended. They heard ideas and information about things pertinent to the cost and affordability of co-housing, such as design, financing, and land arrangements. Lynn, Kathy, and Becca are about to share some of their takeaways, as well as give a basic overview of co-housing. Please put your questions into the chat along with which speaker you want to answer. We'll have Q&A after the three presentations. We may take live questions at that time as well. Now to introduce our three speakers. Lynn Englund serves as the treasurer of Twin Cities Cohousing Network. She has long been interested in historic and contemporary intentional communities and has a special interest in co-housing and democratic learning and governance. Becca Brackett is secretary for Twin Cities Cohousing Network and president of the Cedar Cohousing LLC. She is a Northsider in Minneapolis. With a seed planted from reading Walden 2 in high school, Kathy Ahlers dreamed of the support of an intentional community while raising her two kids. She's since attended 3 co-housing conferences and visited 19 different co-housing communities to gain insights because she'd like to live in co-housing in the next stage of her life. She's currently serving as president of Twin Cities Cohousing Network. Please join me in welcoming our first presenter, Kathy Ahlers.
Thank you, Paul. It's great to see so many people here this evening attending. Welcome. We'll get the slides going here. I do notice that my chat is disabled except for hosts, so just an FYI. Yes, this is the three of us who will be presenting this evening, and I will be starting off with a very brief, a 5-minute intro to co-housing for those who are new to the entire concept. So we can move to this, and this is something that Paul kind of alluded to. Once we get through that whirlwind tour, we'll have the main bulk of our show. Our presentation this evening is going to be these 3 strategic categories, ways to lower costs, and then a Q&A. Next. So I'll be talking about not only what is co-housing, but why are we especially concerned about the affordability aspect. Next. Co-housing really originated, well, the modern version of this concept originated in Denmark, and the architect team of Catherine McCammon and Charles Durrett brought the concept over in the 80s to the US. And from the long Danish word that they use for it over there, they translated it into the term co-housing, and this has stuck. And now there are more than 160 existing co-housing communities in the US, and a number of them in Canada as well as elsewhere around the world. And here are some of the main components. There's a group of residents, future residents, who gather together first. That's the initiation of this form of housing. And the end goal is that there'll be a private home for each individual or family, as well as common spaces that are collectively owned. It's self-designed, self-governed, self-managed. So there's no management company for these. The people who are there learn how to govern and get along and figure out how to do it, and then have work days. The amenities are chosen by future residents. And one of the key factors for gluing together the community and creating this common feeling together is to cook and dine together as a group 1, 2, or more times a week in the common house, the main building for gathering. finally, it's usually an ownership model. So the individual private units are owned. Next. And I guess I would like to emphasize that this is an intentional community. And there are many kinds of intentional communities. There's a whole organization set up to advocate for those and provide education and information. And co-housing is probably the least divergent type of intentional community from the way people in the US currently live generally. Next. So why, before we get into any more of the specifics and I show you some more pictures, what are the benefits of co-housing? Why do we do this? And it's back to what you've heard all about, the crisis of loneliness. This was in force already before COVID hit, and it's just gotten more intense. So co-housing and interdependent community helps to stem some of that and build connections between people. They also gather group spirit from working together. Next. Here is a community in Nashville, and I put this in here so you could see an example. This is their main walkway among and between the buildings. And these are multifamily. These are 2 and 3 unit buildings with varying sizes of individual living units within them. And these were specified, the design, the look, the feel, the size, the layout, everything was specified by the future residents of this community. Next. Here's an example that has a covered indoor area for transit between the units. And here in Minnesota and our friends in New England and all along the upper part of the country know about winter, but I'm sure that as climate change continues to march along, we will have the necessity of something like this in hot climates as well as the rainy places where it tends to be rainy. Next. So how co-housing differs from some other things you may have heard about and maybe have a little bit confused. It's not co-living, although co-living, which is multiple unrelated individuals living in the same dwelling unit, call it roommates, that is not usually a part of co-housing, although it can occur. It has occurred. Also, an intentional community is a very general term. Co-housing is just a specific type. A housing cooperative is a type of legal entity for property ownership where everyone owns a share and then they get the right to occupy their private unit. That's generally not the way co-housing communities are owned. Usually it's through a condominium association. But well beyond the ordinary condominium association, a co-housing community also has those common spaces, and those are owned in common through a separate entity in most cases. The co-housing communities bracket themselves within 20 to 40 private homes, private condos or townhomes, or in a rural area, single family homes. And the common house has whatever in it, whatever amenities in it that the people have chosen. Almost always there's a large shared kitchen and dining room for those group meals. If there are a lot of children, play areas, whether indoors or outdoors or both, gardens, and parking on the periphery, including for a shared vehicle in some cases. The common areas are managed and maintained by the residents, and as I mentioned, this may include some of these other elements, but co-housing is its own thing. Next. Types of co-housing communities can have different kinds of age configurations, be located in different geographic types, and can be owned in a number of ways. And you can see the age configuration, multi-generational or senior is the main division. Oh, well, I can read through this to provide visual access. Geographic location can be urban, suburban, small town or city, as well as rural. And how they are owned can vary. It can be a condo association, a cooperative, or it can be an overarching cooperative organization with rentals. Next. So here we're coming to the end of this part of the discussion. Who lives in co-housing now? When the Cohousing Research Network did their study, they found that the typical co-houser who's living in co-housing today is a white person, is of higher income, is of higher perceived social class, highly educated, oftentimes an advanced degree, and politically progressive generally. And 70% of the time, that resident is a woman. Next. So this brings us to the point of asking, how do we create co-housing for everyone or everyone else, or just about everyone else who would like to own housing? And we have a surging demand for home ownership in the US and not enough supply. So with that, I think I'd like to turn it over to Lynn Englund, who will start us off talking about affordability by design.
Thanks, Kathy. I'm going to briefly cover how principles of design can reduce costs and increase affordability for co-housing communities. Most homeowners don't think about how design choices affect the development cost of their homes. They simply purchase a completed home at a price that they can afford, and the costs of development and the design choices are not apparent in the home at the time of purchase. It's a very different story for co-housing communities. This slide shows a sample co-housing development budget. It's represented as a pie chart, so you get a sense of how much is included in each piece of the pie. And the important piece to start with here is to recognize that total sales from the members of the co-housing community are going to cover 100% of the costs. So unless this community is able to partner with a developer who can carry some of the front end costs, they will need access to funds from the beginning as they begin to explore land costs and pay for soft costs. So land costs may vary from 10 to 25% of a project. It includes the costs of getting a contract on the land so that the group can explore feasibility to make sure that the land is appropriate for their community, the cost of the land, and legal services. Soft costs are an area that is significant at 20 to 35% of the budget. And it includes a lot of administrative fees, legal costs, marketing professionals, the architectural design fees, the costs of developing the project. And it's important for co-housing communities that are starting up to have experienced professionals helping them so that these soft costs don't get out of control and money isn't wasted. Construction, of course, is the largest cost, ranging from about 50 to 65% of the cost of a project. And it includes surveying, site development, as well as building the individual units, creating common amenities, the common house with a common kitchen and dining room, the garages or common parking spaces, and of course, the building and licensing permits, fees, insurance, and construction budget always has contingency fees. At the end of the project, cash is also needed, and this might range from 10 to 15% of the project. And the cash is used for repaying anyone who made an early investment in the community, whether it was a developer or owners in the community, and for furnishing the common house, for paying for fixtures and equipment, and other amenities for the community. Good site design has been one of the hallmarks of affordability and efficiency in cultures across time. And for co-housing communities, that means making sure that someone on the team is experienced and understands the local building codes and zoning ordinances, because the co-housing community wants to make the best use that they can of the property that they have chosen. The site design will also incorporate ideas from owners, future owners, on the arrangement of housing units and how they will engage with each other within the community. And of course, we need an architect who can help them maximize lot views and sun orientation. And as this picture shows of an older Norwegian building, sloping grades can allow homes at 2 different levels, or could provide access for underground parking more easily if that's included in the design. A challenge for co-housing communities is finding reasonably priced development sites that are the right size for 20 to 40 units of ownership housing. Co-housing design principles means designing for social relationships, and that means designing for frequent, spontaneous social engagement. This picture is of Oak Creek Co-housing in Stillwater, Oklahoma. And you can see that it's a row of connected townhomes, 2 rows facing each other across from a quite narrow walkway. So they're much closer together than if a street, an urban street that with cars on it had been there, and people can talk to each other from their porches. So it's easier to see who's up and about and who wants company. Privacy is protected in this community through the rear portions of the house and the back lawn areas. The sidewalk takes people directly from their home to the shared parking areas, and then to the common house where they pick up their mail and have common meals. A challenge in co-housing can be that if the co-housing community is designed as a condominium association, people have a mortgage on their individual unit, but they also will be asked to pay a homeowners association fee or a monthly co-housing assessment to maintain the common areas of their property. So that needs to be figured into the costs as well. Urban co-housing retains those same co-housing design principles. This is a couple of pictures of Capitol Hill Co-housing in Seattle, Washington. It was designed on a very small city lot, only 4,500 square feet. It consists of 9 units. And because this is an urban area, the units are smaller spaces, but co-housers have enjoyed being able to live in small spaces because they share common spaces with others, and that makes their living spaces feel larger. When co-housers get together, they decide on what to include that's within their budget in their community. This community has commercial space on the ground floor, which is Grace Kim's studio schemata workshop. And Grace Kim is the co-housing architect that will be speaking on May 11th. This community also has a common house with a shared kitchen, a dining room, a pantry, a guest bedroom, and group bicycle storage. Of note, we might mention that it has 0 parking, and people rely on bicycles and or transportation, public transportation. Excuse me. Architectural design principles were something that was heavily focused on in the conference that we attended. And the #1 tip was to keep building shapes very simple. I'm showing here a rendering of an apartment building, Stinson Apartments. They are currently under construction and are just beginning to be leased. This is located in St. Anthony Village, which is just north of the city of Minneapolis. And this building I'm using as an example because it incorporates many of the cost-saving design principles that we learned about at the conference, and it's a nice way to tie it back to Minnesota. This building contains 38 market rate apartments. They have studio, 1-bedroom and 2-bedroom units. It is being built by Rise Modular, a new modular construction company. The units are small, ranging from 500 to 1,100 square feet. It's got very simple features, shared walls, and it repeats the same three units throughout the building in multiple ways. Rents range in this building from $1,275 to $1,845 a month. Excuse me. When we talk about increasing the uniformity of unit design, that means keeping the entire number of offerings to choose from to a minimum. The suggestion was only 3 to 5 layouts. So this requires that co-housing communities really focus on their audience before they begin to build. Will they be a multi-generational child-centered community or one that hopes to attract primarily older adults? The layout of the number of units and the types of units will vary depending on the community that is chosen. For example, you might have a 1-bedroom, 1-bath unit, a 2-bedroom, 2-bath unit, a 3-bedroom, 2-bath unit, and then possibly even a unit that is like a duplex. It might have a 2-bedroom, 2-bath unit that also owns a 1-bedroom, 1-bath unit that could be rented out. That would be one way to include rental. The owner would own the unit and be able to rent out the second unit. We learned that the greatest difficulty for co-housing communities is to accept that a cost-saving feature design principle is to not allow architectural changes during construction. So you'll always have somebody who looks at that plan and says, oh, but it'd be so much better if we just took out this wall or just moved that wall or made this a little bigger or that a little smaller. But every change is one that will increase costs because more attention to those details is required by the builders. And it adds for the potential of errors and increased costs. The variation is created after move-in through design and decoration features, changing the flooring, the lighting, the window treatments, etc. Another possible architectural design feature is the use of exterior walkways. And this photo from a co-housing community in Denmark shows how exterior walkways connect units to each other, and the balcony overlooks a common area, which helps promote being able to see who's out and about. Also, a feature in some community ordinances is that exterior walkways might not be figured into the allowable building area. If that's true, that would allow for more generous building spaces inside the allowable developable footprint, but not all municipalities may have that feature. Excuse me. Every co-housing community wants to design for energy efficiency. Most co-housing communities are really interested in wanting to have a net zero energy building, but those choices can easily increase costs. And increase costs at the beginning of the project, although they might make affordability greater over the long term, make providing affordable units at the beginning of sales more difficult. So you always have to be conscious of who might be dropping off the bottom end as you increase costs for energy efficiency. One tip we heard at the conference was to consider working to meet energy efficiency standards, but not going through the process of becoming certified. And so each community is going to have to make cost-effective decisions for themselves. And they should plan for the future if they can't afford to do something now, like perhaps install electric car chargers. They could at least plan their electrical outlets and locations so that they could be installed in the future. Another consideration is modular construction, and most of us are familiar with single-family manufactured housing, what was previously called mobile homes and mobile home communities. But here I want to focus on multifamily modular construction. There's a possibility of savings of 20 to 30% on construction costs, so this really makes modular construction worth exploring. Modular construction delivers a higher quality building delivered in a shorter time frame with more predictable costs. And new modular construction companies for multifamily housing are opening in Minnesota. North Star and Dynamic Homes have been around for a while, but in the last year or so, Rise Modular and Cube Factory have just started up. And of course, their service areas are far beyond Minnesota. They're the entire Northwest and Midwest. Modular construction can also increase energy efficiency by reducing material waste in the factory, by reducing disruption to the building site and the surrounding community, and by reducing the operational energy to produce the building. So as I mentioned before, I'm using Stinson Apartments in St. Anthony Village as an example. This shows some of the efficiency of modular construction. This project was started in late August of 2021. And here we can see workers working on completing the foundation. This is a picture that was taken on September 21st with the foundation near completion. What is going on at the factory is other workers are building each of the individual units that will be trucked to the site and stacked. So on September 29th, we see that the units are now being stacked. On the right-hand side of the slide, you can see the semi-truck hauling a unit that's ready for stacking and the huge crane that's going to put it into place. Each of the stacked units is wrapped, and the gray stuff hanging over the top is the roofing membrane. By October 21st, all the units were stacked and the building is wrapped and ready for exterior finishes. And this is how the building looked as of January 21st in 2022. And this building meets many of the architectural design principles for affordability that we learned about. There are a few variations in the design of the studio 1 and 2 bedroom rental units. The smallest units are in the middle, and the biggest units have light from 2 sides on the ends. The building has very simple architectural design features. It will eventually include landscaped grounds, a patio, a community room, and Wi-Fi in the lobby. And as I said before, this rents at market rates. But there's no guarantee in this building that residents will get to know each other or feel comfortable socializing with each other in the common spaces in the building, because little attention was paid to helping people get to know each other. So design principles can't on its own make co-housing very affordable, but as we go on, we'll see more of design opportunities. If this had been co-housing, additional cost-saving features and benefits could have been added. For example, if it was co-housing where the owners own their own unit, the equity would accrue to the residents, not the developer of the building. It could possibly have been developed as a housing cooperative where everyone owns a share of the entire property of the building and the right to live in a particular unit. Housing cooperatives have qualify for mortgages and homestead credit. Excuse me. It could also possibly include limited equity sharing to maintain affordability into the future. And if combined with land arrangements such as a community land trust or a real estate investment cooperative, that would also provide greater control, local control over the neighborhood development. And Becca will talk about that a little bit later. This building could be resident managed so that everyone contributes something. It provides a sense of ownership, community life, comes alive. It gives people a purpose for living and provides greater meaning in their lives to interact closely with their neighbors. The owners decide which services to contract for and which to do on their own, depending on the skills of the community. So this social design is one that appeals to introverts. Co-housing appeals to many introverts. It reduces social isolation. And there could also be everyday savings through the sharing of time, general neighborliness, and sharing resources in the common kitchen, that kind of thing, sharing maintenance duties, and even reduced costs of everyday living through different entertainment and meal possibilities. And now I'll move it on to affordability by subsidy and pass it to Becca.
Thank you, Lynn. Now we're going to talk about subsidies. As you heard from Kathy, co-housing is housing planned and created by a group of people who want to actually live in it. And is there a subsidy for this form of housing? The answer is no, not in the United States. And from a planning department and zoning viewpoint, it's just another multifamily building. Next. So there are different kinds of subsidies for making housing affordable. Some are at the federal level, some state level, local, and in co-housing, sometimes there's even member-to-member subsidies, such as personal loans. And there's one community in that's building in Bozeman, Montana, decided to put money aside to subsidize to allow a family of lower income to buy one of their units. And then the developer matched the amount that they were going to spend, and then they found the city council was willing to subsidize an equal amount. Next. And so the question is, what does affordable ownership housing mean? This chart is from the Met Council's 2021 affordability limits for ownership and rental, and these numbers are for a family of 4. So the income levels come from the Census Bureau, and the HUD administers it down to our level. And these, when they say it's our area of the Twin Cities, it's actually Minneapolis, St. Paul, Bloomington, and Western Wisconsin. It includes 13 counties. So specific programs will show what the percent of the area median income that will qualify you to get a subsidy. And at the upper end, it shows the upper limit of a house price that would be allowed for you to purchase in the program at that level. Next. So when you read the paper or listen to the radio, you sometimes hear about federal subsidies for building affordable housing, and it's LIHTC. But this one is a situation where private companies who invest in the affordable housing get a tax credit, which they get credit over a 10-year period of time. But since this is rental, it really doesn't apply to co-housing. Next. Next slide. Yeah. So what about mortgages? That's usually how most of us end up buying a home. What about that? Well, let's next slide. The one of the federal programs is FHA. Most mortgages with banks have Fannie Mae or Freddie Mac backing them up, but those can be a little bit inflexible with certain loan criteria. But FHA fills in the gaps by offering mortgages to people with medium or low credit, lower incomes, income from numerous sources, such as if you work in the gig economy or have to have more than one job to pay your bills. And the FHA allows co-borrowers who do not plan to live in the home So that like if you have an uncle that's willing to loan you a couple of $1,000, they can participate in the loan and make it affordable to you. So next. And on the state level, Minnesota has an agency called Minnesota Housing Finance Agency. It's usually just called Minnesota Housing for short if you read about it in the paper. So it works through participating banks that originate the mortgage loans. And the startup program is for first-time home buyers, which is you haven't owned a home in the last 3 years, or maybe you never owned a home. So that and then they have other programs for people who have owned a home before. And sometimes Minnesota Housing can actually subsidize a whole low-income building, but again, that's probably not going to help the co-housers. There also is a nonprofit called the Greater Minnesota Housing Fund, a nonprofit that is a lender, but also a source of technical help for organizations and towns in Greater Minnesota who want to build or preserve affordable housing. Next. And now it's even down to cities and towns. There are some local city programs listed here in Edina, St. Louis Park, and Woodbury, which have been started to assist people who are not only first-time home buyers themselves, but that their parents were never homeowners. The hope is that this type of program might enable more people of color to become homeowners, people whose families have not been able to build wealth by owning a home and passing wealth on to their children. Next. Now, this slide about Minneapolis is that Minneapolis, in trying to frame its 2040 plan, the 2040 plans that are required by the Met Council, they want to provide more equity and fairness and to have some affordable homes throughout the city. So now Minneapolis is going to require, if the land that you're building on was owned by the city or somehow your organization and your developer got some kind of financial assistance from the city, then they will require them to include some affordable units. And for ownership, if you were going to build, say, 50 new homes, ownership homes, 10% of the units have to be affordable at the 80% of AMI income level. So the question is this just a challenge or is it an opportunity? The units that are involved can't be worse than the rest of your units, and they can't be identifiable as affordable. In other words, they can't use inferior materials. And it's also true that small developments and co-housing at 20 to 40 units is probably considered small. But it may be an opportunity to include lower income individuals in our groups. Co-housing groups often attract folks who say, oh, I can't afford what that unit is going to cost. If that person might meet the income guidelines for 80% of AMI, they may be the member who gets the subsidized unit. They might be able to get that first generation subsidy and therefore be able to participate. And I know that Minneapolis, they're not just having a stick, they also have carrots. They have certain down payment assistance for teachers and for police officers and firefighters. It's kind of like getting a college scholarship for your kid. You have to keep searching around the system to find the help that you need. Next. So now these are what I call special land arrangements. Those top 3, community land trust, real estate investment co-ops, and community land cooperatives are types of organizations that provide a structure and rules to achieve affordability. In some cases, they have mechanisms to take property out of the boom and bust cycle of the housing market. And deed restriction is one of those methods to keep price increases of homes at the time of resale in line with the regular cost of living increases, not the housing market increases, which can swing widely. Density bonuses, those occur during development of a project in which the planning department of your town or city gives the developer permission for more units or for an upper floor in return for meeting some other goal of the city, because those 2040 plans have lots of other goals that you might meet: plant trees, create patio space, make sure that you don't have rainfall on your property going into the street, and other things like that. Next. So community land trusts are the one that I feel we need to explain the most. A community land trust makes homes more affordable for the long term. A property, home, and land is purchased, and then the house itself is resold at an affordable price. The land is retained by the community land trust organization and leased to the new owner, like a 99-year lease. The buyers have to meet income restrictions at the time of purchase, such as the 80% AMI. And they buy with a deed restriction so that when that first buyer needs to sell, there's a formula for how much higher the sale price is allowed to be. And the homeowner retains 25% of any increase in value, and the CLT remains, has the rest of the profit. So I consider the fact that after you buy it, your income can go up without any penalty. I consider that a good thing. This land trust stabilizes homes remaining affordable, and so the neighborhood is stabilized as well. This is a model which could be used by a co-housing group which sees its buildings serving as an embodiment of its community sense and not as an investment to speculate with. So, and there have been some examples of a whole entire street or sub-neighborhood is renovated at the same time if there's an area that's really blighted. Next. And this is a list of the land trusts that I know about in Minneapolis or in Minnesota. Rochester has one, Duluth has one, the Western Hennepin County, Minneapolis has the City of Lakes, and Rondo in St. Paul. And we'll send you the links to those when we send you out email after the event. Next. So the other special arrangements, real estate investment cooperatives are mainly a vehicle for renovating business districts. And in Minneapolis, we have the Northeast Real Estate Investment Co-op, and their mission is to revitalize Central Avenue, to create spaces that are renovated so that small businesses can move in and support the residential areas nearby with shopping opportunities. The community land cooperatives can include residential as well as businesses. And the only comment I would make is that because these have structure of co-ops, there's more collective democratic decision-making, which is much more close to the co-housing communities who generally use consensus model of decision-making. Next. So working with your design and with your developer, we feel collaboration is the way to go. The cities and towns in our area have to meet the 2040 plans, and the co-housing community should become familiar with the 2040 plan for their area so they can show to the city how their project advances the city goals, and thus increase the likelihood that their project will be approved first time around. We learned at the conference in October that one of the co-housing communities in Boulder was able to have some townhomes that were built in coordination with Habitat for Humanity. The general contractor did the framing and the exterior work, and Habitat did the interior work, including the cabinets that they buy from their particular supplier. And in Madison, Wisconsin, the Arboretum co-housing community also, they have about 10 buildings. Some of them are duplexes and some of them are small apartment buildings, and they include a Habitat for Humanity home built at the same time and included in a community as the same time as they renovated their other buildings. Next. So overall, we kind of distilled these 5 items as good plans for keeping your co-housing affordable. Seeking and using professionals with co-housing experience can avoid problems such as buying land that wasn't suitable for building, environmental concerns. Number two, talk with your city planners because they can actually sometimes help you find properties for sale. They can guide you to what areas they want to get developed with our residential. Learn the rules for variances if your project is not quite fitting in with the rules. And number three, the modular design, modular construction, because as we mentioned, this speeds up construction and time is money. Number four, consider partnering with nonprofit housing developers, either for advice or also for considering making your development a community land trust. And number five is seek financial professionals with broad knowledge of housing and mortgage subsidies. You probably will need to find a banker to borrow money for the construction. And then of course, you're going to need someone for mortgages for the individuals who are going to buy the units in the co-housing. So that kind of concludes my section. And now we are to the Q&A time.
Kathy, Becca, Lynn, thank you so much. Your presentations were just jam-packed with great information and wonderful ideas. I'd like to ask our host to take down our slide at this point. We're going to stop recording, and we don't have any questions in the chat. Once we have everyone's face up,